So I have the opportunity, the privilege of working with the Jolly 60s on Wednesdays, and it's been a real treat, but it's taken a lot of learning. It takes some time. It takes some spiritual growth, and each of you, I want to arm you in some way for that. It's a very important ministry. Learning how to adjust your speed in life is important. You men are going to find a girl that may agree to marry you, and you're going to have to change your speed in life. You're going to say, tonight I'm married. I'm going to have to see what she's doing. You know, and that's where the idea of the old ball and chain comes from. Because you can't go anywhere because you're like bound, you know. Like, So you have to learn to speed. Then when you finally figure out how to change your speed in life, God gives you a child, maybe. And you're like, hey, hon, we have an infant. We have to think about the infant now. It's like, so life changes speed. It really does. And so you can't let people, you have to adjust when you're getting on the freeway, you're looking to see how fast the traffic is going, and you adjust to the speed. That's dangerous when you go out there and stop, and we see that sometimes, and then you just kind of pull over. You see a lot of times the elderly folks pull into the lane and then begin to speed up a little bit, and everything comes to a standstill. That frustrates me when there's construction and they've been telling you for the last 47 miles that the left lane is about to close. But people still will drive all the way up to the barrel, stop, and then start to creep over. And so everything has to come to a standstill on their freeway. But anyway, life is about adjusting your speed. And with elderly folks, you have to adjust your speed to work with elderly folks. So if you're like, I like to do this, if you ever brought grandma along with you for an activity, you know that you have to think about what grandma's capable of. And you're like, it's not convenient to think of what this person's capable of. But that's life. That's life. And a church will have grandmas and grandpas. And if you're going to work with them, you have to be ready to adjust your speed of life to what's going on. So it's good for the elderly to be looked after. It's also good for us to learn to look after the elderly, to be able to adjust our speed to the people that are in our life. Pastor Dameron is very considerate of the elderly. In fact, yesterday he said, boy, we had communion on Sunday. And I like to not let people know when communion is, just for various reasons. I'm not going to get into that right now. But he said, but some of the elderly are so weak that they have to pick and choose what services they come to. They only have strength to get out to certain services. And praise the Lord, we can stream the services to their house now, which is nice. But they'll try to get out when they can. And he was saying, I'd like to let you know ahead of time because I don't even know when communion's going to be. And I'd like to let you know ahead of time so that you can let them know if there's a service they'd like to make it to. That'd be a real special one to be with, because they like being a part of the church family. They only have so much strength for certain things. But, all right, so in Leviticus 19:32, the Bible says this. Thou shalt rise up before the hoary head and honor the face of the old man and fear thy God. I am the Lord. The Bible teaches having respect for older people. Hoary head is the hair that has turned white from age. So thou shalt rise up before the hoary head and honor the face of the old man. Now in the academy, we get the young people to stand up when an adult enters the room. And that's just part of putting others ahead, respecting others. Children don't naturally respect anything but their own wishes. Part of maturing is learning to put others' needs and wishes ahead of your own. And children, it's not even in their thought. So a parent has to say, I have wishes. And the child says, congratulations, so do I. And the parent says, you're going to be interested in my wishes. And the child says, Not hardly. You have wishes, be consumed with your wishes. I have wishes, I intend to be consumed with mine. And so a parent has to say, you are going to learn to be interested in my wishes. Like, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. And that's parenting. You teach them to put other people's wishes and desires ahead of your own. That's parenting. Because someday God's going to say, guess what? I have wishes. And they're going to say, congratulations. You look after your wishes while I look after mine. And God's going to say, well, I want you to be interested in my wishes. And I want you to put my wishes ahead of your wishes. And if they've never learned to do that, they're in big trouble. So the Bible says we want to respect our elderly. Respect our elderly. Submit ourselves to their needs to some degree. Now in Proverbs 16:31, it says, the hoary head is a crown of glory, if it be found in the way of righteousness. So it's not like you show absolute respect for every older person because they managed to breathe long enough until their hair turned white. Okay? It's not quite like that. You see what I'm saying? The Bible says, if it be found in the way of righteousness. But we still have the responsibility of respecting our fellow human being, right? It says in Philippians, is it, where it says, let each esteem other better than themselves, right? So even if that person, in my opinion, found his hoary head in the way of righteousness, so I'm not going to respect that person. Well, we owe each other respect anyway. I think in Ephesians 5 it talks about submitting yourselves one to another, seeing the needs of our fellow man and submitting ourselves. But especially if a person has a hoary head, they have that white hair, and they found it in the way of righteousness, it's a crown of glory. And we need to respect those things. We remember the evil children, the evil young men that were torn by she-bears. Remember them in 2 Kings 12:23? They disrespected the position of the man of God and the age of the man of God. They didn't. A lot of time, if you disrespect God's authority in life, along with that, a lot of times goes with a disrespect for elderly. And so for them, they mocked the man of God. And the man of God cursed them. He didn't call out she-bears, but basically he kind of just turned them over to the Lord. He didn't say, bears coming. He just said, you guys are in trouble. I'm turning you over to God's perfect punishment. And God decided, yeah, I think bears will do the trick. And so she-bears came and tear 42 of them. Now, working with elderly can be a scary thought for some. Some people would say, I don't know if you haven't heard this yet, you will hear this. I don't really do hospitals. I can't really do hospitals. You go in there, germs and sick people. I don't do hospitals. And probably the same thing. Now, some of you that have worked in nursing homes you're a little more comfortable with the idea, but not everyone is comfortable with a nursing home. You go through the nursing home. There's the tiny lady in the wheelchair, and maybe she sees you, and it's like, help, help. And you're just kind of like, where am I? And there's the smells of the nursing home, the smells of the hospital. There's they're just like, there's a lot of weird things going on here. But in some ways, working with some of the elderly will be like working with children, because they have their unique needs and smells and infants and all those different things like that. And it can be a lot of fun. In some ways, as we get older and older and older, a lot of ways we become children again. And so in some ways you can deal with people that have gotten older, and you have to be patient. They're going to be, in some ways, I'll deal with this some, but some of the selfishnesses return. Some of the crabbinesses about weird things return, just like when they were little and didn't know how to act like an adult, and maybe some of those things start to come back again. And I don't want to scare you, I just want to prepare you for these things. And you do, at first you think, I can't do this, I'm not built for this. But you just, if it's what God wants you to do, and to some degree it is, there's going to be elderly people in the church that you need to be a blessing and a help to. You want to get comfortable with some of those things. So, it used to be we'd have a Jolly's potluck. And so the Jolly 60s would bring in food. And then that's kind of the talk about, like, oh, I wonder what the cooking conditions of those meals that they're bringing in are. And it used to be that I couldn't touch the Jolly. I'm still a little cautious. I still kind of keep track of who brings in what. But you do get past some of those things, and you can put some food on the plate, and you can enjoy it and say, that is so much fun. And even this year I said, man, I wonder if we should go out to eat this year instead of doing our Jolly's potluck. And Kelly's like, couldn't do it. I wonder if we should go out to eat. And they were like, you can't take it with a Jolly potluck. You can't do that. I'm like, all right, you guys want to do it? We'll do it. You guys, if it's that, we can do that. You guys like bringing in your dishes. But a couple things I like. My wife is pretty good about having my children go find some elderly people to talk to. So it's a good thing to make yourself, and then someday when God blesses you with children, make them go talk to an older person. Because little people have their own speed, and older people have their own speed. And you need to make the little people adjust their speed to the older people sometimes and talk to them. Kind of near the end of this last candy sell, it was a Sunday afternoon, and my wife said, Claire, before church starts, go down and find some older people to talk to. And so she's like, okay. So she comes down and she targets Mr. Bain. So there's Mr. Bain. If you don't know him, he's like this gruff construction worker guy, and he's just like sitting there waiting for church to start. Has the heart of a teddy bear, but you wouldn't know it. Okay, so he's there. And so Claire is like, I'm going to go shoot the breeze with that guy. And so Claire walks up. Well, Mr. Bain, he thinks that she's there for a candy sale donation. He's just sure that she's there for a candy sale donation, and Claire is just there because Mom said, go talk to someone older. And so she's there shooting the breeze with Mr. Bain before church, and he's waiting for the question. He's trying to set her up to give the question, and she's just going on and on about life. And finally he says, Claire, why are you talking to me? And I'm making him sound like an ancient person. But she's like, oh, my mommy told me to talk to old people. Anyway, he was so tickled after he said, wait a second. He was so tickled that he had to find my wife and tell her that's kind of fun. But I'm not an old person. But it's a good idea. When Mrs. Sanders, I think every Thanksgiving service, she stands up and says, I love my little munchkies. I love my little munchkies. I think we've heard it for years. I love it when the little kids will come in and talk to me. It means so much to me. It means so much to me. So make yourself like that. That's not, that I'm not cut out for that kind of thing. Make yourself, cut yourself out for it. All right. I know the teens get to go to nursing home and visit. We have nursing home ministry. Sometimes it's nice to, even around Christmas, go to the nursing homes and maybe do a little bit caroling, or find some older folks in the church and just go carol for them. You wouldn't believe how many tears you see when you're out there in the cold, just knocking a door, and it makes the whole night worth it. For that one house, when you go and sing a little bit, and maybe you give them a plate of cookies or something, and you just sing, and they're in tears, and it's very special. The teens have HOP nights, HOP, which used to be helping older people, but I think it's maybe helping other people now, which other people are older than the teens, so it's either way it works. But just go. They have a lot of needs, and just be able to show up and help around the house and do some things. It's good for the kids to change their speed to the speed of the older folks. And it's good for the older folks to have the young people come along and be a blessing to them. Okay, so some goals in working with the elderly. One would be you want to help them maintain a sense of purpose. Maintain a sense of purpose. Remember, they were where you are. They had strength. And with strength, you're able to do certain things. And we're going to preach at you guys because strength can be dangerous. Because you can rely on it, and you don't rely on God's strength. But we're so used to relying on our own strength that when you don't have it, you think, I wonder if I'm washed up. I wonder if I'm washed up. I don't have the strength I used to have. If in working with older folks in your church, and an outreach for older folks, walk into McDonald's any morning of the week, and they take over the center of McDonald's. Older folks that are in there, and they're still struggling for a sense of purpose, and like life is slowing down. We've retired. What is there left in life? Bill Ramus. He's busy. He drives the bus. He'll pick up the Koreans. You'll see him zipping along on the lawn tractor around here, because it's good to give our retired folks a sense of purpose, and there's a lot that they can do. They used to be able to do a lot more, and so in a sense, I say, I'm always asking the Jollies, would you pray? I try to put the academy kids in front of them and say, would you pray for our academy? The devil wants these guys. The devil wants these kids. Please pray for them. And it's like, I used to be able to do so much more. No, now you're freed up to do so much more. You're finally free to do so much more. You can spend that extra time in prayer, and that is so vital. So I try to put college students in front of them. I try to put academy in front of them, and say, would you pray for these young people? Empowered Youth. The week before Empowered Youth, I'll have the competitors come in and do some of their sermons. Elisha came in and preached for him. I'll try to do stories in there and the music, and then afterwards I'll say, next week we're going to have all that. And I try to keep them, updated on what we're doing as a church. And a lot of them are outreach. A lot of Jolly 60s is it is for our elderly, but it's a way for our elderly to have an outreach for the elderly of the community. Does that make sense? So Jolly 60s is an outreach. It's not just a place for our older folks to have some fellowship, in which it is that, but it's a place for our older folks to have an avenue of outreach, to work with people that come in and be a blessing and be that salt. All right? So they have a lot of wisdom to share. When I was a kid, out in Utah, we had the prime timers. And so my dad would be like, my dad enjoyed being around the elderly, and so he would bring us kids along. Maybe we'd go out to eat somewhere with some elderly folks. And I remember as a kid, you're unimpressed with older folks. You're just like, at least there's breakfast involved, right? But as soon as my dad would strike up a conversation, and then they would start talking about events that were intriguing, and you think they are treasure chests of stories. They are treasure chests of stories, and and all of a sudden you think, these people are very interesting and special, and you start to, and then little did I know that just those times with my dad and our prime timers would turn into someday God even using me in Jolly 60s. Jolly 60s can be a real blessing too. They can still get around. And make some hospital visits. They have more time to make some hospital visits. And you wouldn't believe, I'm involved in hospital visits, and I'll go to see somebody, and there's some Jollies there already. And there's some other Jollies that show up before I leave, that just get out and visit people and be a blessing to them. So give them a sense of purpose. Another thing is give them avenues of fellowship. So they do need to have a chance to get together and be around one another. I remember when I took Jolly 60s over, Mr. Snyder, my father-in-law, used to have Jolly 60s, and I asked him, I'm like, any advice? And he told me one thing. He said, make them laugh. They love to laugh. Tuesday morning when Mr. Schrock was telling his Thanksgiving jokes, I was tucking those away for Jolly 60s. And I told him I shot my own turkey this year. The boom of the shotgun really startled the other people in the store. They loved it. And I added a couple to it. I just said, there was the mama turkey that was scolding her disobedient little boy turkey and said, if your father could see you now, he would roll over in his gravy. I know, it's sad. But we have a lot of fun with the Jolly 60s. They will just roar, and they love that humor. I remember when I first got into Jolly 60s, And you just love them, and you earn their trust over time. But I remember when I first got in there was this one fella who was who wrote for the newspaper for years and years and had a stroke, but he's actually passed away since then. But Michael Bartholomew was his name. So I had a bit of humor, and I thought I'll share this with the Jollies. And I remember saying, "What's the Native Americans' favorite meal?" And they said, "I don't know. It's like scalloped potatoes." And so they started chuckling. And anyway, so Michael's like, "Hey, I know some Native Americans, and they're good folks." And it was like the atmosphere went out of the room. It was like, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, what are you doing up there, being all politically incorrect?" And I remember thinking, what just happened? We were just having fun, and now I'm like the enemy, you know. There's a lot of interesting things that happen, and over time you kind of get ready for them. Michael was just saying how, preaching in the nursing home, you have the lady that is still singing. As you leave the song time and go into the preaching time, she's still in the song time. As that slowly starts to dissipate throughout half of your sermon. But the older folks are a lot of fun. So give them a sense of purpose. Give them avenues of enjoying fellowship. And then there's also, you want to help them navigate some late in life needs. Now, the older folks can latch on to people, and you have to help them not to latch on to people and help the people they latch on to. And let me explain that. What happens is, you go to visit somebody and they're like, "Oh, somebody has come to see me. Nobody ever comes to see me but you. You are the one person that loves others." And you're like, "Wow, I must be that. I'm going to need a ride tomorrow and the next day and the day after and then twice the day after that and then the next day." And then you're like, "Oh." So you're like, "I just came by to smile and cheer you up. I wasn't intending to be here for the next 5 hours." It's like, but what am I going to do if you don't help me? And you're like, I have to stay. And then tomorrow I'm going to need somebody because you're the only. And come to find out there's other people stopping by. But older folks can latch onto people, so they'll burn out the people they latch out. So the person that wanted to be a blessing is afraid to be a blessing from now on. Or they make themselves be a blessing, but they grow bitter while being that blessing. Does that make sense? They grow bitter because I've got to do it. This person, I'm the only one and I have to. It's no longer I enjoy helping this person. So the older folks can burn people out if you don't help them not burn people out. And then you got to help people not get burnt out by older folks latching onto them and burning them out. Okay? That actually was pretty tough when I first got Jolly 60s, and somebody's like, "You have to find a ride for me to church." And come to find out they had burned all sorts of bridges. Like nobody wanted to get that person because they would never be ready when they went to pick them up. After church, when they were going to get a ride home, they're like, "I'm not ready to go. I want to talk to 106 people." And so basically, but you're the Jolly 60s guy. You have to find me because that's what churches do. And so I had to learn, you have to help that person not burn bridges and help the people that help her not get burnt out. Does that make sense? And because you don't want people getting bitter. You don't want to become bitter at the people that are like, "Oh, look, there's the guy that helps the older people." You're like ducking, and you don't want to be afraid of the elderly in your church. Okay? So you got to be proactive. Just put your phone on silent and never show up. Is not the solution to helping the elderly people at your church. Honestly, you want to say, now you're going to need some help with some transportation. Let's talk about that. So, like Chuck Smith. You guys remember Chuck Smith? He moved away with his daughter, but he was the guy that looked like Santa Claus for a while at church. Chuck Smith, and you remember Chuck. But Mr. Leslie helped him get set up with Meals on Wheels. You might say, do we as a church need to start dropping off every meal to older people that don't feel strong enough to make their meal? He's got money, but we as a church, should we be dropping off every meal? Is that a responsibility of a church once a person gets old, dropping off every meal at their house? And that's a question. Like I don't want that responsibility. Do I start asking people in the church to start making 100 meals and going all over the place? Anyway, so we got Meals on Wheels. There's people that will come by, and he had the money to pay for the service. They would drop some of those things by. Transportation. There's a lot of times PCACS, Porter Accounting, Aging and Community Services. There's a bus that will stop by and get you with a wheelchair lift and take you places. And a lot of times the older folks are like, I don't like that. Well, you need to not be selfish sometimes. And it is a little bit of selfishness, because humans get selfish, and when they get older, they get extra selfish, because it's like, well, I want my church to come. I want somebody from my church. And I remember a while ago we had a funeral going on, and somebody says, I need a ride to this hospital, this doctor's appointment. And we said, well, call this number. Qualified people will come with a special vehicle and help you get to that doctor's appointment. It'll cost you $1. It's $1 per ride. I mean, it's a service. And they're like, I just don't like it. I want a church member to come by. Well, we have a funeral. Everyone's going to be at that funeral. Well, somebody needs to come get me anyway. And so just helping, and you have to be a little bit stern sometimes. I remember there's one man that's with the Lord now, but years ago, my landlord is doing this. I want to move, and you have to move me because you're the jolly guy. I want to move to somewhere else, and you have to move me. And my landlord this, and my landlord this, and I told her off, and I did this. And you have to say, okay, 1,000,000 years into eternity, when that person maybe isn't in heaven and burning in hell, but you are real concerned about this, which, in my opinion, wasn't that big a deal. That these things that aren't important are like super important to you. So you have to sometimes be stern. You don't want to. But sometimes you have to be stern and say, now listen, you cannot do this. You have to be a Christian even in the older years. So Meals on Wheels transportation. Katie Kimmel brings in Mrs. Durledge for church. We saw them the other night at Culver's enjoying some meal. Some of them don't have night vision anymore. At your age, are you starting to realize that your night vision starts to go? Anybody in here? I am. I'm seeing how night vision begins to go. I told you my story about hiding one time, and Alec came right up to me, and I didn't see him there, and he could see perfectly, and I'm like, I'm going to scare him when he comes in here, and he was standing there. I had no idea. So night vision starts to go. And so even they'll have needs around their house, and they'll say, I sure would like it if somebody came and did some cleaning for me, or came and did this, and that's fine, but they want us to line up people to come constantly. And they'll say, and I say, well, you want to hire somebody? Hire, spend money for somebody. Yeah, you want to hire somebody to come by and do some basic cleaning, basic cooking, and you want to help them navigate some of these things. Like, I have a church. They should do all these things for me. And so you're helping them with some late in life needs. So then they have pain. They're coping with this and that. I know even like Miss Frame. She's like, I don't come a lot of times because somebody will need to bring a wheelchair to my vehicle. And I'm like, we'll bring a wheelchair. Well, don't feel like you're putting us out. We'll help you. And so they don't have the strength they once had. And so they'll say, I don't want to inconvenience somebody. You don't want us to change our speed to be a help to you. But you know what? We need to change our speed sometimes to be a help to you. It's good for us. We need to learn. That's how life is. I'm going to change my speed to be married. I'm going to change my speed to have children. I'm going to change my speed when my wife gets sick. I'm going to change my speed when my parents get sick. It's good to learn that my speed doesn't get to go my foot, I need to take it off and let God put the brakes on sometimes, put the foot on the accelerator, whatever speed He says. It's like, I feel like people have to adjust to me, and we need to learn how to do that. There's also some end-of-life decisions that you might want to help them navigate a little bit. I know Pastor Dameron likes to try to make sure that this person passes away, and you don't want the funeral home taking advantage of the one that's going to pay. Well, they need this nice coffin, they need this, and then pretty soon they're bankrupt. So you can help them with some of those decisions. Sometimes they want to leave some money to the church or to Jolly 60s. I remember Grandma Binkley. Grandma Binkley, she left. She actually set aside money for the Jolly 60s to go out to eat. That was kind of fun. John Beeson, he left some money for the church, and we built the pergola that's on top of Mr. Leak and me. He did it, and I watched him. Sally Harvey, she passed away back in December. She was a little tiny lady that couldn't possibly make it up the stairs to be baptized. She was so frail. And so after church one day, we had some witnesses. We went into the swimming pool, and we helped her down into the hot tub, and she was baptized in the hot tub. And and it was important to her. She wanted to be baptized, and she wanted to join the church, and she left some money. I didn't even realize. I got a letter in the mail that I was her POD, me personally, payable on death for one of her bank accounts. And so there was some money in there. And so I went over and I said, well, I just know that she wanted this to go to Jolly 60s. And so for accountability's sake, because I'm quite certain she didn't want it to go to me. For accountability's sake, I went right into Dr. Vogelin. I'm like, hey, this is what's happening. This is this, and this is what I intend to do, and I'm going to keep receipts. Just to when there are sometimes some of that might happen, and of course you don't help people for the hope of getting something, but sometimes they'll say, can you help out with this or that? Another end of life decision would be DNR. DNR. I remember when Russell Klett was dying, his daughter was asking me, she goes, I don't know about what to do about DNR. Anybody know what that is? Do not resuscitate. So some people have to say, now for your father, do we want DNR? Do not resuscitate. Meaning, if they go, should we let them go or should we bring them back? So that's a tough decision. And so I kind of advised her. I said the doctor needs to, if he starts to go, the doctor needs to keep him alive. Unless we're bringing him to the brink of death again. If all we can do is bring him back to the brink of death, and then he goes, and then we bring him back to the brink of death, and he goes, and we bring him back to the brink of death, that's just cruel. That's not good. But if they start to go, and we can bring him back to possibly life, and he can heal, and maybe have a few more months or a year or whatever, let's do it. And that's kind of the decision we made. So let's not. When they start to slip away, when do I stop giving him this or that? If there's a chance we can bring him back to some semblance of life. But again, if we're bringing him back to this kind of that. But anyway, Miss Klett was like, I don't know what to tell the doctors. I'm telling them just let him slip off into eternity. And I'm like, well, can we? It's good. God has His time, and at some point we won't be able to bring him back. At some point, God's going to take him. But at the same time, let's think this through. I think you understand what I'm saying. But that's one of the things that some people haven't really thought through, and you might want to be able to be a help with them. Okay, so next I'd like to talk about some things to keep in mind with working with the elderly. First of all, it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. I'll walk through the auditorium, and Leona's been coming from Valpo, and Jeremiah from the wing, and I'm like, oh man, I got to get up to choir practice, but I got to swing by and see Leona real fast. Connie comes with Mrs. Liss. She always has something to talk to me about. John Leach, he's like, John Leach, he's just a college student. No, believe it or not, he's up in years. He just has you fooled. So, this morning I was in one of my classes and he's calling me because he wants some advice about something. So it just takes time. It just takes a lot of time. And at first you're like, oh, these demands are they just get in the way of they're inconvenient demands. But you just learn to cope with them. You're like, Lord, help me be where I need to be, when I need to be. Help me not to be, help me to enjoy being on call for you. because in the ministry, you're kind of on call. And there's nothing wrong with protecting your time at times, but at the same time, the Lord help me to be on call when I need to be on call, anytime during day or night. Now, I can't never be home and look after my family, but God helps us with those things. Now, another thing to keep in mind with older folks is they have less going on in life and more problems. So they have less in their life. Their problems are bigger. You know how when you have a little bit of a headache, you're like, oh, doesn't matter. I got to go. I got to be somewhere. And sometimes the headache slips away as you do. But if you're just there with your headache, you have no place to be. Like, man, my head hurts. Sometimes it gets worse because all you have is your problem at that point. And then they get to the point a lot of times where all they have is their problem. So it's a recipe for depression. There's a man I called a couple days ago that's suffering from depression. And I said, you needed to be at that testimony service. You're fighting, and you had no business not being at that testimony service on Thursday morning. It was such a blessing. It was such a blessing. And you want victory over these things. Pastor Darren was talking about, for those of you that weren't here, he was saying that how the devil, you know how weeds will grow anywhere? Weeds will grow anywhere. And the devil's seeds of depression will grow anywhere, except there's one type of soil it doesn't grow very well in. And he mentioned that on Thursday morning. He said, the heart of thankfulness. Weeds of depression don't seem to be able to get a foothold there. So depression, they can get pretty down. They can be quirky. One time I got a phone call that said, Brother Mitchell, you need to call me. One of your workers said something horrible to me. Call me back and I'll tell you what it was. And I'm like, oh. So I call back and I'm like, hey, how you doing? I'm like, I wrote it down to get it right because I didn't want to mistake it at all, but I'm just shaking with anger, and it doesn't seem like Christians should speak to each other this way. And I'm just like, one of your workers in Jolly 16, and I'm just like, what was it? Well, as you know, I just had shoulder surgery. I'm like, and they said to take it easy because, I have it written down here. You're not a spring chicken anymore. And it's a good thing I wasn't on video phone because I would have just, I'm like, number one, they called you because they love you and they're checking up on you and you're furious at them for telling you you're not a spring chicken anymore. So older folks can be very quirky, and if you don't know how to laugh in that ministry, it can be pretty miserable. You have to let yourself learn how to laugh and be patient and just enjoy older folks and their quirkinesses. Their feelings can get hurt pretty easily. Jean Simmons, I did her funeral like 2 weeks ago. She had quit coming for a while because her feelings were hurt. But she always loved the church, and the family said, "Would you guys come and do her funeral?" They can be offended by odd things. When Trump was elected, I wasn't prepared because we have a lot of outreach. So we have a lot of people with, politically, they're scared that the Republicans are going to take away my Social Security, and so I'm not even prepared. But I walk into Jolly 60s that Wednesday after that Tuesday night Trump was elected. I walk in, and one of the ladies from Gary says, "We just put the devil in the White House." And then they said the Portage van. They were screaming at each other on the way in on the Portage van, and so that's why you pray for wisdom every day, because you don't know what you're going to walk into, but God does. So I knew them long enough that I could be pretty stern and say, wait just a second. Are we Christians first, or are we Democrats or Republicans? I have a problem with us putting our political whatevers in front of treating each other with respect. And we were able to just boom, in about 3-4 minutes, it was cleared, and God gave us a fantastic day. I really praise God for the spirit we have in Jolly 60s, and I ask God to keep it, because we have a special thing in that room every Wednesday, and it's because of the Lord, and only because of the Lord. Something else about working with older folks, they've seen a lot. And they enjoy sharing their story, which again takes time. And then here's something that I kind of hinted at earlier. Some will view the church as their social security. I've paid in my whole life, and now it's time to cash in. I'll need somebody cleaning my house, cooking my meals, running me to all my doctor's appointments, fixing my furnace, buying my groceries. After all, it's what the church does for the elderly. Any decent church will do that. And I finally got to the point where my church should be doing that for me. So that kind of goes back to what we said earlier. You have to help them navigate through those things. You want to be a help. But with that attitude, that's an attitude of selfishness, nobody will want to check up on them anymore. All right? Nobody will stop by and be. So you have to help people be a blessing, and you want to help the older folks receive a blessing and be a blessing at the same time. So it is funny. It came to my attention that I need to, you know how you guys, there's the little cart by the back door where you guys put your sack lunch together? By the back door where the Jollies walk out? Basically, a couple weeks ago, they cleaned it out on the way out the door. And so on the one hand, and I've even seen Jollies at the front desk. Years ago, Pastor Dermott had basketball schedules there. Like a workout for the basketball team. And so somebody walked in and says, Nellie, you want a workout schedule? She's like, yeah, grab me one of those. She's walking into the restroom. Just grab me one of everything. Okay. They're just one of everything as they go by, it's funny. We'll go out to eat and we'll have people, stuff their purse with ketchup packets. Like we went to Culver's one time, and they're just like, and I have to make the speech. And again, not all elderly people are the same, but I'll have to make the speech before we go to a buffet. I'll say we're going to eat, and when we're done, we'll leave the food there. Okay, we're not going to load up food to take with us. We're not going to. And again, it sounds funny, but you're like, not all elderly people are the same, but they'll. Take stuff they shouldn't take. I'm an older person. I've gotten to the point where I can take what I want, And you just help them, and you just have fun with it. And you might say, I'm scared. This lecture has scared me. I don't want to help with older people, but I'm just trying to help you be ready to help them. We had a lady who was dying. She was in hospice at her house a couple years ago. And she's like, I don't want a nurse coming and looking after me. I want church ladies with me, taking care of, uncomfortable things that they're not qualified to take care of. I don't want hospice here. I want my church here. And it can be a very touchy thing because you don't want church. When they're qualified to do the uncomfortable parts of the end of life, you want your church family coming and just holding your hand. And so she's like, I want my church family here. I don't want hospice here. And so we actually attempted it, and it was terrible. It was terrible. And we learned a lot through it. And so we come to the point where, and even the hospice ladies, they had to come in near the end, and they said, what are you doing? She needs a church family. She needs someone to hold her hand and comb her hair and just love her and pray with her and sing with her. We should be doing all these uncomfortable things. We're qualified. You're not qualified. So it's one of those things where you can get bitter. You don't want to say, when Mrs. Armacos or somebody's like, hey, can you sit with her for the next 8 hours? You're like, I should. And it just makes the whole thing uncomfortable. There's wise ways to go about these things. And you want to pray for wisdom and that. Anyway, we learned a lot with that situation. Hospice had to come in, and when they finally came in, there was a lot of, but it got to the point where things were settled down and people could be just a church family to her as she went off into eternity. Okay, so I'm out of time. I didn't tell you I have another page and a half of notes. I was just going to tell you some of the things. I was going to tell you about our Jolly 60s program. But I think at the very least, I hope to have prepared you. And again, ministry is working with people. And people are going to be inconvenient. And you need to not only take the path of least resistance in ministry, you need to say, Lord, something's going to come along that I don't like because I'm selfish. Help me, Lord, to overcome those selfishnesses, but do it in a wise way. Don't just choose something miserable because it seems Christianity is me finding miserable things to do and doing them. You're allowed to be wise and pray about things and ask the Lord to help you. But working with people is going to be inconvenient. And when God has something for you, you're getting on the freeway and you're on the acceleration ramp. Acceleration doesn't mean get up to the speed you want to be at. Acceleration means you get up to the speed so that you can look over and see traffic. And you can see, oh, there's a spot there I'm going to be in. And so you kind of gauge what speed you need to be in to slide into that spot. And then things go smoothly. So sometimes you're going to have to learn to adjust your speed to the needs of the people around you. And I believe that's what, Jim, you're going to be a dad someday possibly. You're going to come home and you're going to feel like doing something, but your children have needs. And you're going to have to adjust your speed, the speed you'd like to be at, to the needs of them. That's what Ephesians 5 means when it says submitting yourselves one to another. A father submits himself to the needs of his home. So no, they submit to my wishes. They bring me food. They rub my feet. No. You have it backwards. Jesus came and he washed the disciples' feet. He submitted himself to their needs. He's always been Almighty God. But Almighty God submitted himself to our needs. And that's what manliness is. And you're going to have older folks in your church that have needs. And you need to learn to submit to the needs of the people around you. And it's just going to take some wisdom. But the thing is, God loves you and he loves them. And learning to see them through his eyes makes all the difference.